So, in this channel that we cover all aspects of violence, active shooter being one that absolutely is constantly asked about. Earlier, we presented an active shooter protocol that a couple of my special forces buddies did from Australia, and that was very, very popular. And then since then, I have had a couple of people recommend that I share a presentation, have on a man named Ed Monk. Rory Miller was the one that first introduced me to Ed, and then through that, I've heard of other people that have seen Ed's presentation. What you're about to get is probably one of the most succinct, straightforward presentations on active shooters. It will absolutely give you total clarity as to what is important, what you absolutely need to understand for an active shooter. So, I'm going to get right into it, but just a little bit of background. Ed is a former Army lieutenant colonel. He also is a part-time police officer, was a police officer in his town. And he was a high school teacher. So he has seen things from all aspects. And the presentation that you're about to have, it's going to be a multi-series that we're going to do here to cover it all. But it probably is the best presentation that I've seen on active shooters and on giving you the objective principle that should determine everything when it comes to responding to an active shooter. I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to let him present it to you. But trust me, this is going to be a series that you're going to want to share with people. I know probably this is the first time you've heard the man's name, but trust me, after you have this presentation, I think you're going to really understand why so many people have recommended him to me. So without further ado, Ed Monk. Ed, thanks so much for agreeing to share your presentation with us on active shooter realities. Really the best way for us to get going is just for me to let you take over and do the presentation, and then we'll just have some organic Q&A after it. This isn't a live. I know you're used to doing more live type things. The audience is very responsive though, so I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions and a lot of feedback from this. But other than that, please take over.
All right, we'll see if we can get this thing to work. Can you see the slides?
I can see, yes, I can see everything now.
Okay, so Tim, thanks so much for this invitation and for just hosting this thing and doing all the legwork on it. With the presentation, the topic tonight is the very ugly topic of the active shooter threat, but also how we as a country have gotten the response to this threat very, very wrong for 30 years, and we're just refusing to change and do what's right. And we'll look at what Math and Time tells us is what we can do to actually limit the victims in future attacks. So this presentation is going to include data on what we're most likely to see in future attacks based off what we have seen in previous attacks, and then options for both organizations and individuals to plan for and to respond to active shooters that will limit the number of victims that we have. I'm going to go very fast, so buckle up. My contact information will be on the last slide, so anybody that sees this, feel free to contact me at any time. So this is some of my past, and my past comes into play as I study and continue to study this active shooter threat. I've studied the active shooter threat pretty intensely for about 13 years. And as I've done so, my experiences and my perspectives have given me tools to kind of organize this and present it to others. I spent 24 years active duty in the Army, including duty in Europe and Iraq. And what really comes helpful there is the ability to focus on a threat, to define a threat, and to make plans that will counter specific threats. Also, in planning combat operations, part of that is to plan for the casualties you'll have and to plan to minimize and lower the number of casualties that's expected in the operation. I've had active shooter training both inside and outside law enforcement, and I have designed and provided active shooter training for about the last 10 years. I've trained police officers, armed staff of schools, armed church security teams, and just the general population. I'm in my 12th year of law enforcement. I've been a firearms trainer in 3 different states, probably at about the 12-year mark. and I've taught high school for 4 years. So I've got some degrees. I've lived around quite a bit, but what really helps me when I go in and talk to schools is the fact that I have taught school. So they know I have seen it from inside, from their perspective, and that helps me quite a bit. So why in the world would we spend time looking at something so ugly? Well, as you well know, in a military operations order, before you ever talk about your plan, you talk about the situation and the enemy. You have to understand a threat before you can make a plan that will adequately address the threat. So understand it and then prepare plans both for organizations and individuals on how you can stop them. So this is what's happened most often in the last 30 years in our country, so we can use it to kind of predict what's most likely to happen in future attacks. The active shooter is probably going to be a young male. They're going to plan their attack in a gun-free zone, a place where it's illegal for citizens to have guns. So when they show up with their illegal gun, they're going to have a monopoly on gunfire from anywhere from 3 to 15 minutes. And those few minutes where they're the only ones that can shoot gives them enough time to get enough victims to give them the notoriety that they want. Most active shooters start their attack with multiple weapons, 2 to 4. So that gives us something to know what to plan for. They usually, one of their guns is a long gun, and they usually start their attack with a long gun, a rifle or a shotgun, shoot it till it's empty or it malfunctions, go to their second gun, shoot it till it's empty or malfunctions, and continue. Most of them have over 100 rounds of ammunition when they start. At least 3 documented had over 1,000 rounds on them when they started their attack. These shootings last a relatively short time, but that's relative. If you're waiting 3 minutes before a meeting starts, that goes by so quickly you can't even play on your phone effectively. But if you're in a room getting shot at for 3 minutes, that's a freaking eternity. So just because we say it's a short amount of time, just a few minutes, the damage, the killing that's being done is phenomenal in that. Most of these shooters don't plan on escaping. They plan on dying by their own hand, dying in a shootout with the cops, or giving up and being imprisoned. There's not been an active shooter that's totally gotten away with what they did. They usually won't fight an armed defender. If someone else shows up or has a gun and confronts them, most of them will not fight back. Most of them will, at that point, will stop, either kill themselves or give up. And then that last line down there is the ugly math that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. On average, once an active shooter pulls his gun and starts his attack, someone's going to get shot every 10 seconds. Now, that's an average. If they're very aggressive, it'll be worse. And if they're not so aggressive, it won't be as bad. But that's an average of 10 people or one person shot, people shot every minute. So if that's what we're most likely to see, then our plan ought to focus on that. We can call it an audible at the line of scrimmage if something weird or different shows up, but that's what we're going to plan for. The subset of that big 30-year picture looks like this. If the shooting is at a school, if it's a high school or middle school, the shooter is one of your students. And it'll start in the cafeteria or the front office. Have shootings started in classrooms? A few. Have they started in the hallways? A few, but most of them start in the cafeteria and the front office. Elementary school, different animal. The shooter is not a student. He's unrelated to the school. He's not a parent. He's not a teacher. He's not a student. It's someone totally outside of the school. Because of that, it will start at the entrance or it'll start at the playground. It won't start in the cafeteria because it's not going to be one of the kids already in the school in the cafeteria. But now the elementary school has the additional tactical problem of the playground, and most playgrounds are open and visible to people driving by. So it's very easy to attack elementary school kids by shooting, even from off school property, by shooting onto the playground. This presents a problem when I go and I talk to school superintendents. They want to treat every school building the same. If they treat this school building differently with security measures than another school building, they're afraid they might be looked at as playing favorites with a building, when actually that makes sense. If you're talking about hardening the outside of a building, making it harder for people to get in through locking doors and buzzing people in and that kind of thing, that makes sense for an elementary school for this threat. But it doesn't really make sense for a high or a middle school because your shooter's already in the building. He's one of your own students. If it's a school shooting, we have an increased chance of multiple shooters. We've had 5 attacks in this country with multiple shooters. 3 of those 5 were students of middle schools and high schools that attacked their own schools. And then school resource officers. Many schools have police officers, deputy sheriffs that work at the school. Their job is to be there at the school, mostly for security. They might do other things. And they are a valuable asset, and I'm sure they offer some deterrence to this threat. But if you look at what's happened in the past, they're not a guaranteed deterrent, because I can show you 9 attacks that happened at schools. The shooter was the student. They knew that school. They knew it had a resource officer, yet they still carried out their attack there. And then resource officers are also not a guarantee of low body count, because we have 3 attacks that happened at schools with resource officers that had double-digit victims. If the shooting happens at a college or university, the shooter is most likely a student or a very recent student, and the attack will start in an academic building. Churches. Most of the big church attacks start in the parking lot. And this is difficult when I go and talk to churches to try to get them to have serious security in the parking lot, because if we can identify the shooter in the parking lot and preferably stop him in the parking lot, we'll have a low victim count. The shooter is not a member or an attender of that church. He might have been there a couple of times, and sometimes they come to recon. They'll come to a service or 2 to recon the building, to see what's going on, to check the security before they come back for their attack. Having armed church members has worked 100% of the time. We saw this most recently with West Freeway Church down in the Dallas area, and then New Life Church out in Colorado, where a volunteer church member on the volunteer security team happened to have a gun and stopped it very quickly, and we had single-digit victim count instead of a huge victim count. If the shooter is motivated by radical Islam, that's another little subset. They act differently. There's a greater chance of multiple shooters. 3 of our 5 multiple shooter attacks in this country were, as I said, school students. The other 2 of those 5 were motivated by radical Islam. These shooters will be more aggressive. They will shoot much more rapidly, and they will reshoot much more. Most active shooters reshoot victims, but they will do it at a quicker pace. And then, unlike many active shooters that will shoot themselves when they hear the sirens or know the police are closing in, this subset will not. The ones motivated by radical Islam will either fight to the death, or they will fight hard to escape and get away. So if that's the threat, what should we use when we are making a plan to counter that threat? And what I see all too often from organizations is they're not using the right thing. Many use emotion. They will either use emotion for their plan, or they'll use emotion why they shouldn't do a plan that would work. If we make plans based off emotions, we get bad plans. And of course, we have politics. A lot of plans or lack of plan is based off political agendas, and we get very bad plans when we base them off political desires. Hope is a wonderful thing. There's nothing wrong with hoping we never have another active shooter, or that you never have one at your location. There's nothing wrong with that. Hope it never happens, but you better plan like it'll happen tomorrow. If you're not planning like it will happen tomorrow, you do not have an adequate plan. So what that leaves us with is the only thing that really matters, the thing that will help us lower victim count if we'll use it, and that's math and time. And this is simple Jethro Bodine ciphering of carrying your knots and your gazentas, really easy stuff. Math is not political, it's not emotional, it's not religious. Therefore, I can get people to agree on it. I can't get them to, they do. Math is math, everybody agrees on it. That makes it very powerful. Math has determined how many people were shot in previous attacks, and it will determine how many people are shot in future attacks. So if we want to have an effect, a positive effect, meaning lower the number of victims in future attacks, math and time is the only thing we really need to look at. As I said, 98%, the vast majority of our shooters in this country, the attacks are done by one single shooter. But even if it's only one person that shows up to do the shooting, there's actually 2 enemies there. Because when they start shooting, a clock starts running, and that's the other enemy. The goal of any plan should not be just to stop the active shooter, because the active shooter will always stop. The plan, the goal, the motivation ought to be, how do we stop it quickly? They'll always eventually stop for some one reason or another. We want to stop it quickly so that we can get low victim count. Using that simple mathematical planning factor of one person shot every 10 seconds, the math tells us if we allow him to shoot for 60 seconds, 1 minute before we stop him, we should expect on average 6 people to be shot. That's the planning factor without adjustment. But actually, he will be shooting more rapidly in the first minute than he does in the last minute. He will beat the average in the first minute. So I would vary that and say you're probably looking at 8 to 14. The math suggests if we let him shoot 3 minutes, on average, you'd expect an 18 victim attack. But again, he will beat the average in the first 1 to 2 minutes. So I would say plan on 20 to 25. If we let him shoot 5 minutes before we stop him, and that's about the average, he'll probably get about 30 people, and that's about average. If we let him shoot 10 minutes, God forbid, the math suggests we'll have 60 victims. If we let him shoot 17 minutes before we stop him, the math would suggest we would have 102 victims. And just a weird coincidence, we know the Pulse nightclub shooter in Orlando shot for 17 minutes before his rifle malfunctioned to the point he couldn't fix it. So he shot for 17 minutes. He was in there for 3 hours, but he only shot for 17 minutes, and he shot exactly 102 people. Weird coincidence. So this lays out kind of how time works against us. Someone walks into a crowded place, pulls their gun, shoots the first victim. We have the first person on the ground bleeding. Here we go. The gun has fired and the clock is running. The two enemies are there. There's usually a 1 to 4 minute delay between the first shot and the first 911 call made by somebody there. This is surprising to some people. Why are they waiting that long to make a phone call? Well, they're getting shot at and they've got other priorities like surviving, escaping, trying to get away. Touching their phone is not what they're thinking about. It's usually 1 to 4 minutes. For this example, I've made it a minute and a half. So this is a very important point. Any organization for which the 911 call is a requirement to stop the active shooter, that organization must accept that they're going to have double-digit victims because they will already be double-digit victims before the first 911 operator even hears that there's a shooting. It's going to take that operator 15, 30 seconds to understand the caller and push a radio button to tell every police on dispatch, I've just received a phone call that there's a shooting at XYZ location. So before the first police officer hears on their radio that we have a shooting, you're already around 20. It doesn't matter how brave that cop is or all the cops on dispatch are, they have just now heard about it. They can't go back and unshoot those 18 people. All they can do is get there as quickly as they can. If you're in a municipality, a city with city police, you may get a fairly quick police response, 3 minutes. If you're out in the county and you're relying on a patrol deputy or a state policeman, it could be much longer. But let's just say 3 minutes. So by the time the first cop pulls up into the parking lot, you're already well past 30 on your way to 40. If the police officer does exactly what we want him to do or her to do, jump out of the car, get in the building, because most of them are in buildings, and stop the shooter, we're already between 30 and 40. That's what the math tells us we will have. And that's generally the way the active shooter attacks play out. Well, so it did stop. The problem is it stopped too late. Well, what finally stopped it? Somebody, a good person with a gun, aggressing on the active shooter, getting close enough to shoot the person. That works. It works every time it's tried. It just worked here too late. What if we take what works, someone with a gun aggressing on the shooter and stopping him, but we move it way back in the first minute instead of at the 7th minute? What we find is if someone has a gun, a good person has a gun, and they're present, and by present, my definition of that is they're close enough to hear it or see it. They're not somewhere in the building, somewhere on the property. They're close enough to hear it or see it when it starts. In every case in our country where someone with a gun, a good person with a gun, was close enough to hear it or see it, and they aggressively acted to stop the active shooter, we have single-digit victims, 1 to 9. Dayton, Ohio is the only example where that was not true. The shooter was extremely aggressive, and even though the police on site that heard it got to him in 34 seconds, we still have double-digit victims. But this is a 95% success rate. We really should pay attention to things with 95% success rates. So I know this is a video, but assume all the people in the audience here, we're all in a room together and someone with a gun walks in and starts shooting at us, right? how long would you like that shooting to last? Or said on the slide, how soon do you want that shooting to stop? And usually when I ask crowds this, when I'm giving a presentation, they look at me funny and some of them giggle, you know, they say that's a silly question. Actually, it's a very powerful question because like math, I can get everybody to agree on this answer, no matter your political, sexual, religious bent. Everybody agrees they want the shooting to stop right now, immediately. Nobody says, hey, Ed, I'd like him to shoot for about 5 more minutes before. No, everybody wants it to stop now. So the easy part is getting everybody to agree on what they want. We all want the shooting to stop quickly. The hard part is to get leaders to break the inertia of just doing what we've always done and actually breaking that inertia and making a plan, not just the plan the previous guy had typed in a book or the plan we downloaded off the internet, but actually make a plan as an expectation to get us the results that we want. I ask this of every organization I talk to usually, and I warn them it's going to be an uncomfortable question. What's an acceptable number of dead and wounded victims to have while we wait on that 911 call that's going to take 1 to 4 minutes, and then the police to be dispatched by the operator, which will take a little more time, and then police travel, which could be 3 to 15 minutes, and then when they get there, police to make entry into the building, and then once they're in the building to find and stop the killer. When all that has taken place, what's an acceptable number of bleeding people to have on the ground? And usually if I listen, when I talk to crowds in person, I can almost always hear a few people whisper 0. 0 is the only acceptable number. And that's an example of people that are stuck on hope. They hope it's 0. Well, you know you're in an active shooter attack when the first shots go off and the first person's shot. So you're already past 0. If you can't get in your planning past 0, then you're not going to be an effective leader and you really don't have any business planning for this.
Okay, and we're going to stop it right there for part 1. As you can see, Ed gets right into it, and it's compelling information. I think you're going to really get a lot out of this series. So please share this with anybody that you think might, really get something out of it. Also, guys, just remember, surviveviolence.com. This is where you can get your free masterclass. This is where we can keep in touch with you, give you all the latest information on what's going on. If you like series like this is it's great to be on our list, and you get all the insider information right away on top of all the free information that you get by joining surviveviolence.com. Again, costs nothing to do, and you get a free masterclass. So please take advantage of that. Okay, looking forward to getting you the next series on this, and really looking forward for your feedback on this. Again, I think it's just an absolutely crucial topic. Anyways, all the best. Stay safe.